Why was she the only one walking against the tide? Captain Sarah Chun stepped through the main gate of Naval Special Warfare Command, her civilian jacket hanging loose against the rigid precision surrounding her. SEAL teams stood in perfect formation across the courtyard, boots lined like shadows carved in stone. Flags caught the morning light, their edges snapping against the breeze. The Admiral stood on his platform, silver hair sharp as his expression, surveying everything like a hawk who tolerated no interruption. And then his eyes found her. She felt the weight instantly, not just his stare, but the dozens of others who followed his gaze. Civilians didn't walk here during ceremony hours. No one did, not without permission carved into steel. But Sarah kept moving, her boots soft against the pavement, her badge clipped high enough to show authority, low enough not to provoke questions. She told herself she could stay invisible, that walking across the courtyard wouldn't spark chaos. She was wrong. "What is that woman doing here?" The Admiral's voice carried, deliberate. Heads turned. The silence of discipline cracked into whispers, smirks, and quiet disbelief. She heard it all, not the words themselves, but the judgment threaded beneath them. An intruder, a contractor, someone who didn't belong. Her pulse stayed steady. Training had drilled composure into her long ago. Yet inside, a familiar heaviness pressed against her ribs. She had been here before, in other rooms, other wars, other moments where her worth was invisible until tested. Recognition never came at the start, only at the end when the smoke cleared and lives were saved. The Admiral stepped down from his perch, striding with the certainty of a man used to command. Boots echoed across the stone as he intercepted her at the flagpole where every soldier could see. His tone was measured for the crowd, not for her. "Ma'am, you need to leave this area immediately. This is a restricted military ceremony. Civilians are not permitted." Civilians. The word carried the sting of dismissal, an erasure of every scar and memory that shaped her. She unclipped her badge, held it calmly. "Sir, I have authorized access for the tactical briefing at 900. He glanced at the badge as though it were an insult. With a flick of his hand, he dismissed it. "I don't care what paperwork you think you have. Security." His voice cracked through the courtyard like a whip. "Escort this woman to the gate." The two guards moved with practiced efficiency. Hands hovered over belts, not threatening but not respectful either. They flanked her, one on each side. The choreography of humiliation was complete. Sarah didn't fight it, didn't speak. Her silence was its own defiance, yet her eyes were busy. Every step toward the gate she counted. Every angle, every shadow, every sound. She cataloged the Raptors on the flight line, their tail numbers and fuel tank configurations. She studied the comms tower, the distance to the operations center, the response time of the scrambling crews. Information slid into her mind like puzzle pieces waiting for a picture. To the guards, she was just a woman being shown the door. To Sarah, the courtyard was a battlefield, and she was already mapping its terrain. Behind them, the Admiral's voice thundered over the intercom. "All personnel be advised. Unauthorized civilians attempting to access restricted areas will face prosecution under federal law." The message wasn't protocol, it was personal. She was the warning. The young SEALs shifted, muttered, smirked. She caught fragments. "Look at her, contractor with a badge thinks she's somebody." The words cut sharper than they should, not because they doubted her. She had lived with doubt for years. No, what hurt was how familiar it felt to stand in uniformed silence while others judged without knowing. To be measured not by ability but by appearance. Still, she said nothing. And then the siren. 3 sharp blasts ripped through the morning. The courtyard exploded into motion. Boots pounded. Voices shouted. The ritual dissolved into urgency. The announcement thundered. SEAL Team 6 extraction compromised. All available aircraft to immediate standby. Sarah froze mid-step. This wasn't routine. It was catastrophe. The Admiral snapped toward the operations center, face blanching as transmissions poured through the comms. 8 operators pinned down in hostile terrain. 1 bird down with hydraulics. Backup aircraft too far to matter. For a moment, Sarah stood at the gate, watching chaos ripple through command. Watching men who had sneered at her rush to save their brothers. She should have walked away. That's what they wanted. That's what protocol demanded. But her ears picked up details, coordinates, vectors, descriptions that only someone fluent in air support would truly hear. Enemy forces converging. Civilians in the kill zone. Too many risks. Too little time. And just like that, her feet turned her back around. She walked toward the operations building against the flood of personnel surging the other way. Some brushed past her without noticing. Others stared, confused. Why wasn't she leaving? Why was she heading back into the storm? The outer briefing room buzzed like a hornet's nest. Screens lit with maps and grids, enemy positions flashing red. Officers barked reports. Sir, the Apache don't have the precision guidance. Not in urban terrain. Not without collateral risk. The secondary Raptors are 14 minutes out. SEAL Team 6 is surrounded. Ammo low. Wounded confirmed. The math was brutal. They didn't have 14 minutes. Sarah stepped closer. Her voice, calm, steady, cut into the noise. Optimal vector is 270. Use GBU 39s. 15-meter radius. You'll open the corridor without structural collapse. The nearest officer blinked at her. He didn't question how she knew. He just stared, caught between disbelief and recognition. Then the Admiral's voice cut like steel. Security, remove this woman from my ops center immediately. The room stilled. The screens blinked. The SEAL commander's voice crackled through the radio, raw with desperation. Contact on 3 sides. We need air support or we're not making it out. Her chest tightened. She could hear them, not just their words, but their fear. Men she didn't know, yet men she understood. Their lives balanced on timing, on precision, on decisions that someone in this room was too slow to make. Her hand found the comms headset before anyone could stop her. Falcon 27, requesting immediate coordination with ground element Trident 6. Authentication, Sierra 44 Charlie. The room froze. The pilots on standby responded instantly. Respect bled through the static. Copy, Falcon 27, we've got you, requesting target confirmation. Every officer turned toward her. The Admiral's jaw clenched. Her voice didn't waver. Adjust angle 285. Delay fusing 7 seconds. Crosswind correction 3 degrees. Execute on my mark. The Raptors adjusted. The SEALs on the ground braced. The first precision strike cut the air. And in that silence, the moment before detonation, she let herself feel what she had buried under composure. The sting of dismissal, the weight of being unseen, the ache of carrying a past she couldn't tell them, not yet. Because there was something she hadn't revealed, not to the Admiral, not to the room, not to the young men who mocked her. Not yet. The blast tore through the streets half a world away, a surgical strike so precise it looked impossible on the screens. Dust billowed. Enemy formations scattered. And in that moment of chaos, SEAL Team 6 surged into a narrow corridor, alive but still hunted. The ops center erupted in noise. Officers scrambled to track new positions. Radios barked overlapping demands. The Admiral's voice strained to reassert control. Who gave that authorization? Who? But the pilots cut through the confusion, calm and steady. Falcon 27 strike successful, adjusting for follow-up run, awaiting guidance. Every head in the room turned toward Sarah. She stood still, headset in place, eyes fixed on the grid lines flickering across the display. Her voice came low, clipped, professional. 2 targets northeast, bearing 310. Secondary GBU with delayed fuse, 3-second stagger. You'll cut off the pursuit vector without hitting civilian zones. The pilots confirmed instantly. No hesitation, no questions. The strikes fell. The monitors flared. The trapped operators called it in, breathless but alive. Trident 6 moving through Corridor Alpha. Multiple wounded but mobile. Cover effective. Continue pattern. Sarah exhaled slowly, steadying her chest against the rhythm of chaos. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to know any of this. To the Admiral, she was still a civilian, an unwelcome interruption. But the men on the ground didn't care about her clothes, her badge, or the politics of authority. They cared about survival, and they trusted the voice guiding them home. The Admiral finally snapped, his face flushed with fury, his authority stripped bare. I don't know who the hell you think you are, but I won't have a contractor hijacking my operation. Guards. The security detail moved again, slower this time, uncertain. Their eyes flicked between her calm figure and the monitors showing 8 lives depending on her words. Sarah didn't move. She pressed her finger to the comm switch. Falcon 27, adjust for crosswind correction, bearing 288. Execute final strike pattern, then hold for extraction clearance. Copy Falcon, executing now. The last explosions rolled across the city blocks. A narrow alley cleared, walls collapsing outward to create an escape route. And then the voice on the radio. Base, this is Trident 6. We've got our corridor. Moving, all 8 still alive. Repeat, all 8. Air cover is perfect. Whoever's guiding those raptors, don't let them go. The room fell silent. 8 lives still intact. The Admiral's breath hitched, his authority crumbling under the weight of undeniable fact. Yet still, his pride clawed for control. Enough, he barked, his tone sharp as broken glass. You will identify yourself, now. Sarah removed the headset slowly. Every eye tracked her. Officers, guards, young SEALs who had mocked her minutes before. She could feel their disbelief, their unease. This wasn't supposed to happen, not here, not with her. Her voice came quiet, almost gentle. Authentication codes don't lie. The pilots know me. The ground teams know my work. That should be enough. But Commander Jake Morrison, grizzled, scarred, watching her with eyes that had seen too much, leaned forward suddenly. Something flickered in his face. Recognition. That voice, his words cut through the silence. I've heard it before. The Admiral tried to dismiss him, but Morrison kept speaking, louder, urgent. Operation Nightfall, Operation Steel Thunder. That voice guided us out when we were cornered. You don't forget the one who saves your life. Sarah's chest tightened. Memories she had buried flickered like fire, tracer rounds in the dark, her voice steady over radios while men bled and prayed. Morrison stood, pointing directly at her. Ma'am, for operational security, confirm your call sign, right now. The room froze. Every heartbeat seemed to echo off the walls. Sarah's eyes swept across them, the young men still wide-eyed, the officers uncertain, the Admiral pale with stubborn disbelief. She took one step forward. Her voice, steady, calm, carried across the silence. Call sign Viper. The effect was electric. Morrison's face shifted from suspicion to reverence. His voice dropped, raw with certainty. Gentlemen, you're looking at the most decorated F-22 pilot in air support history. Captain Sarah Chun. Call sign Viper. She's not a contractor. She's a legend. Gasps broke the silence. Officers exchanged stunned glances. Even the guards lowered their hands from their belts, standing straighter, as if instinct demanded respect. The Admiral froze, his authority dissolving in front of his men. And Sarah, she stood still, her face calm, though inside her chest a storm raged. Because she hadn't wanted this. Not like this. She hadn't come here to be recognized. She hadn't come here to relive the weight of names whispered in war zones. But the truth had broken free. The SEAL commander's voice returned over the comms, thick with gratitude. Base, we are clear, 8 alive, mission successful, whoever's on the mic, you saved us, again. Silence followed, a silence filled with awe, with shame, with unspoken apologies. Sarah met the Admiral's eyes, his face drained of color, his authority, his pride, his control gone. She didn't gloat, didn't speak, didn't move. Sometimes dignity doesn't need words. But inside the ache returned, not triumph, not vindication, something heavier. Because for every life she saved, she remembered the ones she couldn't. And as the seals on the ground limped toward safety, Sarah's mind whispered the ghosts of names only she still carried. The courtyard had never been so quiet. Only an hour ago, Sarah had been marched toward the gate like an intruder. Now the same men who had smirked at her stood at rigid attention, their eyes lowered, their silence sharp as glass. Respect unspoken, awkward, heavy. Admiral Richardson lingered near the comms table, his knuckles white against the edge. His voice, once booming and absolute, was gone. He had no words that could repair the damage. Not yet. And Sarah, she hated this part most of all. Recognition never came clean. It came like a wound reopened, dragging memories into the light. Men called her legend, hero, savior. But they didn't know the whole truth. They didn't know the sleepless nights, the missed calls home, the faces she carried in silence. The SEAL commander, Morrison, broke the stillness first. He stepped forward, his voice steady but softer than before. "Ma'am, you don't remember me, but I remember you. Kandahar, 2011. Nightfall. We were boxed in. No air corridor, no way out. Your voice cut through the chaos. You saved my men." His eyes glistened, though he didn't let them fall. Men like him never did. Sarah looked at him, really looked, and in his weathered face she saw shadows of that night. She remembered the tension, the impossible angles, the smoke curling through her cockpit while she calculated one chance, one strike, to carve a path. She remembered his voice too, ragged with exhaustion but still fighting. "You made it out," she said softly. He nodded once, "Because of you." The weight of it pressed into her chest. She wanted to tell him it wasn't true, that survival had been a mix of luck and timing and the cruel arithmetic of war. But she stayed silent. Sometimes, letting someone believe in salvation was kinder than telling them about the ghosts. The Admiral finally spoke. His voice cracked under the strain. "Captain Chun, I owe you." She cut him off with a glance. Not sharp, not angry, just final. "Sir, the only apology that matters is to the men who nearly died waiting for air support that should have been there from the start." The words landed heavy. He looked away. Her badge, still clipped to her jacket, seemed almost absurd now. Contractor, civilian, labels that had never fit yet had shielded her from notice. For years she had lived in that quiet limbo, half inside, half outside. It had been safer that way, anonymous, invisible. Until now. The SEAL teams shifted uneasily, their faces caught between awe and regret. A few dared to glance at her, then dropped their eyes quickly. They had mocked her hours ago. Now they stood in the shadow of someone they realized they should have saluted from the moment she walked in. Sarah didn't need their regret. What she needed was air, space, distance from the walls closing in. She turned, heading for the door. No one stopped her this time. The corridor outside the ops center stretched long and sterile, its fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. She walked slowly, every step heavy. Her hands shook not from fear, but from the adrenaline that had nowhere left to go. Her body wanted release. Her mind refused it. At the end of the hall, a narrow window looked out onto the runway. She paused there, eyes catching the Raptors resting silent, their sharp silhouettes glinting in the sunlight. Machines she knew better than her own reflection. Machines that carried her name etched into their history, though no one could see it. For a moment, she let herself breathe. But even here, the ghosts followed. She saw the faces of men who hadn't made it, missions that had gone wrong, nights where she had given everything, calculations, precision, timing, and still returned with empty call signs. She remembered their last words, their silences. They didn't haunt her cockpit anymore, but they haunted the quiet spaces after. Captain Chun. The voice came from behind. Morrison again. He approached slowly, as if careful not to break the fragile moment. She didn't turn right away. You should be with your men. They're alive, thanks to you. He stepped closer. But that doesn't mean I leave you standing here alone. She almost smiled at that, almost. Silence stretched between them before he spoke again. You carry it, don't you, the weight, the ones you couldn't save. Her throat tightened. She hated how easily he saw it. I carry enough, she said finally. He nodded, so do I. There was no judgment in his voice, no pity, just truth, shared truth. And for a fleeting second she didn't feel entirely alone. Back in the ops center, the Admiral was facing his reckoning. She heard the faint echoes of his voice carried down the hall, addressing officers, demanding protocol changes. He was trying to stitch together authority from the tatters left behind. But Sarah didn't care about his struggle, not now. She had come here for one reason only, to sit in on a briefing, to offer quiet insight, then disappear again. That chance was gone. Her anonymity shattered. Her name, her call sign, dragged back into light. And yet something in her chest stirred, a dangerous thing. Hoping. Not for herself, but for what came next. Maybe her presence here, exposed and undeniable, meant others like her wouldn't face the same dismissal. Maybe her humiliation in the courtyard could change the way bombs carved corridors. Morrison broke the silence again. My men will want to thank you in person. She shook her head. Don't. Gratitude isn't what I need. Then what do you need? She looked out the window once more, the raptors gleaming under the sun. She thought of the strike patterns, the call signs, the way her voice had steadied trembling men thousands of miles away. What I need, she said slowly, is for people to understand that dignity doesn't wear a uniform. It acts quietly when it matters. Morrison studied her for a long moment, then nodded, as though he understood something deeper than words. The intercom crackled faintly through the hall. The SEALs had made it back to base. Their voices carried laughter, ragged and exhausted, but alive. Sarah let herself close her eyes. For tonight at least, 8 men would see the sunrise. But tomorrow there would be more battles. Some in war zones, some in rooms like this, where authority and pride crushed truth until it was forced to bleed through. She opened her eyes again, steady now. The war wasn't over, not out there, not in here, not within her. And she would fight it the only way she knew how. Silently, precisely, with dignity that didn't speak. The courtyard looked different in the afternoon light. Shadows stretched long, and the hum of the base had shifted from chaos back to order. But the air was heavier. Something had changed, and everyone felt it. Sarah stepped back outside, her civilian jacket catching the breeze. She had expected whispers, maybe stares. Instead, the SEAL team stood at attention as she passed. Not ordered, not commanded, instinct. She hated it. Respect, when forced by revelation, tasted bitter. It wasn't earned in this courtyard. It had been carved long ago in skis filled with fire and smoke, and she never wanted it paraded here like spectacle. Admiral Richardson stood near the flagpole, the same spot where he had humiliated her hours earlier. His posture was stiff, but his eyes betrayed the storm behind them. Captain Chun. He said it softly, as if testing the weight of the name on his tongue. She stopped, waited. His jaw tightened. You have my apology, publicly, privately, professionally. What happened this morning was unacceptable. The words cost him. She could see it in the way his shoulders strained against his uniform. He wasn't a man used to bending, but protocol left him no choice. Sarah's face betrayed nothing. Your apology isn't mine to accept. It belongs to the men whose lives nearly ended because you dismissed the one person who could help. The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Officers nearby lowered their eyes. Richardson swallowed hard, his pride a noose. Then from across the courtyard, the sound of boots. SEAL Team 6. 8 men battered and bruised, uniforms torn, bandages wrapped around arms and shoulders. Their exhaustion was carved into every step. Yet when they saw her, they stopped, as if drawn by gravity. One by one, they raised their hands in salute. Sarah froze. It wasn't the sharp, practiced motion of parade ground ritual. It was slower, heavier. A salute born not of obligation but of something deeper, gratitude, reverence. Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell them to stop, to lower their arms, to save their strength. She wasn't the hero they thought she was. She was just the voice who had happened to answer in time. But the salute lingered, and in their eyes she saw something that wasn't about her at all. It was about survival, about the need to believe in something, someone, when the darkness closes in. She returned the salute, hand trembling just slightly. For a moment, the courtyard was silent, but for the whisper of the flag above them. Then Morrison broke the stillness, his voice low but carrying. "Gentlemen, you stand in the presence of a pilot who saved more lives than you'll ever know. Remember this moment. Learn from it. Respect isn't about appearance. It's about truth." The young SEALs shifted, shame flickering in their eyes. Earlier they had mocked her. Now they struggled under the weight of their ignorance. Sarah lowered her hand. "Enough," her voice cut through gently. "You don't owe me this, not today, not ever." But Morrison shook his head. "With respect, Captain, we do." Her chest ached. Not from pride, from the memory of other teams she hadn't been able to save, salutes she would never see. Richardson finally stepped forward. His tone had changed. No anger, just resignation. "Captain Chun, I'm issuing new orders. Effective immediately, you'll serve as permanent tactical air support coordinator for SEAL operations." The announcement rippled through the courtyard. Officers stiffened. The SEALs exchanged quick glances. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "That's not what I came here for." "It's not a request," Richardson said, though softer this time, as if already knowing her resistance. "This base needs your expertise. Today proved it." She let the silence hang, her jaw tightening. The weight of command wasn't a compliment. It was a chain. She had walked away from it once for a reason: to breathe, to live outside the endless churn of missions and losses. And now they wanted to drag her back. Morrison stepped closer. "Ma'am, I understand if you don't want it, but I'll tell you what I tell my men. Sometimes the fight chooses us." She looked at him, searching his face for judgment, pity, expectation. But all she saw was truth. Her mind drifted to nights in cockpits, to radios filled with static, to the sound of men whispering last words before silence. She had promised herself she wouldn't return to that weight, but promises made in peace rarely survived war. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice a quiet retreat. Richardson nodded, though the relief in his eyes betrayed that he already considered it a victory. The SEALs began to disperse, limping toward the infirmary, their salutes still heavy in the air. The young trainees, once mocking, now watched her with wide, uncertain eyes. They had learned a lesson today. Whether it would last was another question. Sarah turned toward the hangars. She needed space. Inside, the Raptors rested under steel beams, their sleek bodies gleaming under harsh lights. She approached one, hand brushing along the cold metal skin. The smell of oil and fuel filled the air. Familiar, comforting. This was where she belonged, not in offices or courtyards, not in politics or posturing. Here, among machines and silence, where precision replaced pride. She closed her eyes, forehead resting against the metal. In the hum of the hangar, the ghosts whispered again. Faces, names, missions that hadn't ended with salutes. Her chest tightened. She whispered to the silence. "I didn't save them all." The hangar answered only with echoes. A soft voice came from behind. Morrison again. He had followed quietly. "You never can," he said. She turned, startled, then sighed. You don't know what it's like." "I do." His tone was firm. "Different battlefield, same ghosts. I see them every night. Men I lost, men I couldn't reach. But I also see the ones who made it, because of me, because of my choices. That's the weight, Captain, both sides. You don't get to carry one without the other." She studied him for a long moment. For the first time, she believed he understood. Silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of cooling engines. Finally, she spoke. "If I take this role, it won't be for Richardson or for recognition. It'll be for the teams, for the men who walk into fire knowing someone has their back." Morrison nodded slowly. That's all they've ever needed. Her hand rested against the Raptor, one last time before she turned away. The hangar doors stood open, sunlight spilling across the floor. Outside, the world kept moving, unaware of the battles fought in silence. Sarah walked into the light, her shadow stretching long across the concrete. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the pull again, the same pull that had brought her back into the ops center when she should have walked away. The pull that refused to let her rest while others fought alone. She had tried to escape it, but maybe Morrison was right. Maybe sometimes the fight chooses you. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to choose it back. The orders were cut within 24 hours. By morning, the base's command board listed a new line in bold type: Captain Sarah Chun, Tactical Air Support Coordinator. Her name, her rank, her call sign whispered behind closed doors. And already, the whispers had grown louder. Some welcomed her, quietly, respectfully. The men of Team 6, now recovering in the infirmary, carried their gratitude like a shield. Others weren't so gracious. Officers muttered about protocol and chain of command, their voices heavy with skepticism. Trainees swapped rumors in the mess hall, half in awe, half in disbelief. Sarah ignored them all, or tried to. She sat in the briefing room the next morning, a simple notepad in front of her. She didn't need it. Her mind could calculate faster than ink. Still, she let the pen hover, drawing faint lines, maps that existed more in her head than on paper. The room filled slowly. Flight officers, intel analysts, squad leaders. The air carried tension, a mix of curiosity and resistance. Admiral Richardson entered last. His presence had changed. No longer the unchallenged authority, his words were measured, his gaze cautious. He introduced her with clipped formality, as though the syllables themselves weighed too much. "This is Captain Sarah Chun, call sign Viper. She will be coordinating all tactical air support operations going forward." Murmurs rippled through the room, not loud but sharp. Sarah stood. She didn't like speeches. She wasn't here to inspire. She was here because 8 men had walked out alive when they shouldn't have. That was enough. Her voice was steady, low, deliberate. "I don't care about titles. I don't care about politics. My only concern is precision. Lives depend on it. If you listen, if you adapt, your teams will come home. If you don't, they won't." The room stilled. Her words weren't fiery. They weren't loud. But they carried weight, the kind that came from truth spoken without ornament. She sat again, folding her hands. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, until Morrison leaned forward. "She's right," he said. His voice was gravel but firm. "We've seen what happens when pride gets in the way. We saw it yesterday. You'll listen to her because she's earned that right 10 times over." Richardson said nothing, his jaw set. The meeting moved on. Coordinates were laid out, mission scenarios dissected. Sarah watched, listened, and when necessary, spoke. She corrected strike vectors, adjusted timing windows, pointed out gaps in intel. Every word was practical, precise, undeniable. And yet she felt the resistance. Not open, not defiant, but in the small glances exchanged across the table, the subtle pauses after her suggestions, the way some officers wrote her notes last, as if reluctant to commit. She knew this fight well. It wasn't fought with bombs or bullets. It was fought in silence, in doubt, in the weight of being underestimated again and again. When the meeting ended, the officers filed out, their faces unreadable. Morrison lingered, leaning against the wall. "You handled it," he said. Sarah closed her notepad. "They don't want me here." "They don't have to want it," he replied. "They just have to live with it." She almost smiled, almost. That night the base settled into routine. Engines roared faintly from the runway. The smell of jet fuel carried on the wind. Sarah walked alone along the flight line, her hands in her jacket pockets. The stars above were sharp, scattered across a dark sky she knew better than anyone. Flying used to be her refuge. Up there, the noise of doubt fell away. There was only math, instinct, the edge between precision and chaos. But now, grounded, she felt exposed, trapped in politics, forced into rooms where whispers stung louder than gunfire. She paused by one of the Raptors, its silhouette cutting clean against the night. She touched its wing, the metal cool beneath her hand. "You're the only thing that makes sense," she whispered. Her voice sounded small in the vastness. The memories pressed in again, men she couldn't save, missions where precision hadn't been enough, faces blurred with smoke and dust. She saw them at night when silence left her unshielded. She heard their last words in the hum of engines. And still she kept going, because stopping meant drowning in them. "Captain!" The voice startled her. She turned to see Richardson standing a few yards away. His posture was less rigid now, less commanding. He looked almost human. "I know you don't trust me," he said. "I know I failed yesterday, but this role matters. We need you." Sarah studied him, her expression unreadable. "You need results, not me." He hesitated, maybe both. For a moment silence stretched between them. Then he spoke again, softer. "I built my career on order, on control. I thought that was leadership. But yesterday, you reminded me that real authority isn't about titles. It's about competence. And I failed to see it." Sarah looked back at the Raptor, its sharp edge glinting under the floodlights. "Competence doesn't wear a uniform," she said. "It acts quietly when it matters." He nodded slowly. "Then let me ask you this, what does it cost you to keep acting over and over?" The question cut deeper than she expected. She felt her chest tighten, her throat ache. She didn't answer, she couldn't. Richardson didn't press. He only said, "For what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed." Then he walked away, his figure swallowed by the night. Sarah stood alone again, hand on the Raptor, the weight of his question heavy in her chest. What did it cost her? Everything. But she didn't say it, not to him, not to anyone. She lifted her eyes to the sky, vast, endless, waiting. Somewhere out there, another mission waited too. Another fight she hadn't chosen, but that would choose her all the same. And when it came, she would answer, because that was who she was. That was who she would always be. Silent, precise, a shadow in the skis. Viper. The alarm came just after midnight. Sarah was already awake. Sleep rarely held her for long anymore, not with the weight she carried. She sat at her desk, half-finished notes scattered, when the klaxon wailed through the base. The sound cut through the night like a blade. Within minutes she was in the ops center. Screens glowed, radios spat static, voices clashed. The air was thick with urgency. An Allied convoy pinned down in mountainous terrain. Hostile forces closing from two ridgelines. Civilian villages nearby. Limited strike windows. The kind of nightmare scenario that made precision everything. Sarah stood at the edge of the room, scanning the data feeds. Her presence no longer drew open challenge, but it drew weight. Officers watched her carefully, some expectant, others skeptical. Admiral Richardson stood back, arms crossed, silent. Morrison was already there, face grim, waiting. The operations officer rattled off the situation. Convoy immobilized, 3 vehicles down, hostiles massing here. He pointed at glowing red markers on the map. A passion range, but precision is limited in this terrain. Raptors 10 minutes out. 10 minutes? The convoy didn't have 10 minutes. Sarah's voice cut in, calm but sharp. You won't hold with Apache alone. Terrain shielding makes their angle too steep. You'll miss half the targets, and the civilians in Sector Bravo will take the rest of the hit. The officer hesitated. Then what do you suggest? She stepped forward, eyes fixed on the map. Stall them, not with firepower, with confusion. Lay smoke at Sector Delta. Force them to adjust their approach vector. You'll buy time until the Raptors arrive. Silence, the idea was unconventional, risky. Morrison broke it. She's right, do it. The order relayed. Moments later, the map lit with plumes of smoke markers deployed. Enemy formations wavered, shifting to adjust. Sarah leaned closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing. Now redirect the convoy. Push them south toward the ridge line. An intel officer frowned. That's a dead end. Not if you're carving an exit, she said. Her hands moved instinctively, tracing invisible angles in the air. Raptors will enter from bearing 245. Deploy GBU-53s at staggered intervals, create a controlled landslide. It'll open a path here. She tapped the screen, a narrow choke point hidden beneath topography lines. Safe zone, minimal civilian exposure. The room stilled again. Someone muttered, "That's insane." But the convoy leader's voice crackled over comms, ragged with desperation. "We're running out of ammo. Hostiles closing. Any options?" Sarah didn't hesitate. She keyed the mic, her voice steady. "Convoy, this is Falcon Control. Adjust course south, bearing 180. Raptors inbound. We're opening your path." The convoy leader didn't question. He just obeyed. Sometimes desperation was the clearest trust. Minutes stretched like hours. The room's air thickened with anticipation. Officers hovered silent. Every eye was on her now. Not just Morrison, not just the Admiral, everyone. Then the Raptors checked in. "Falcon Control, this is Viper lead. 10 clicks out on approach." For the briefest second, her chest tightened. The name Viper echoed back at her, carried by someone else's voice now, but it wasn't hers anymore. It was the sky. She steadied herself. "Viper lead, adjust to bearing 245. Confirm staggered ordnance drop. Target marker Delta 37, fusing 2 seconds. Copy Falcon, executing." The room held its breath. On the screen, red markers closed tighter around the convoy. Then the strikes. Explosions rippled across the ridge. Dust and rock cascaded downward, reshaping the terrain in real time. A controlled landslide, violent but precise. When the dust cleared, a narrow path cut open where there had been none. The convoy leader's voice came through, stunned. "Falcon, we've got a corridor. Moving now. Still under fire, request continued cover." Sarah's voice didn't waver. "Raptors, adjust. Secondary strike pattern bearing 260. Neutralize flank positions only. Minimal spread." The Raptors responded instantly. Their precision tore into enemy strongholds without touching the villages nearby. Within minutes, the convoy pushed through the path, battered but alive. The ops center erupted in noise. Officers cheered, slapping shoulders. Morrison exhaled, relief softening his hard features. Even Richardson's jaw loosened, though his pride kept him silent. But Sarah didn't cheer, didn't exhale. Her eyes stayed on the screen, watching the convoy icons crawl to safety. Her chest ached, not with relief, with the weight of what almost was, with the memory of missions where corridors hadn't opened in time, where the voices on the radio had cut to static mid-sentence. She pulled the headset off slowly. The room buzzed around her, but her silence carved space apart. Morrison approached quietly. "You just saved 30 men, don't downplay it." Her eyes flicked to him, tired but steady. "I didn't save them, the Raptors did. The convoy did, I just calculated." He shook his head. "Don't lie to yourself, you carried them out." But she couldn't accept it. Not fully. Because if she accepted every life saved, she'd have to face every life lost, and that ledger was never balanced. Richardson finally spoke, his voice softer than anyone expected. Captain Chun, Falcon control is yours, permanently, effective immediately. It wasn't a request, it was a concession, a recognition. Sarah said nothing. She only nodded once, her expression unreadable. The room moved on, chatter resuming, reports compiling. But Sarah lingered in her silence. Because even in victory, she felt the ghosts pressing closer. Later, alone in her quarters, she sat on the edge of her bunk. Her hands shook faintly. She pressed her palms together, trying to still them. She thought of the convoy leader's voice, the crack in it, the way desperation turned instantly to belief when she spoke. That kind of trust was dangerous. It tied her to lives she couldn't control. It bound her tighter than any uniform ever had. She whispered to the empty room, her voice breaking. "How many more?" No answer came, just silence. And in that silence she realized the truth. This wasn't the last test. It was only the beginning. The next mission came sooner than anyone wanted. It started with a briefing that felt like a knife edge, a high-value target hidden deep in a densely populated district. Intel marked the location, but Intel also admitted what the map couldn't hide. Families lived in the adjacent buildings. Children played in the courtyards. Shops lined the alleys. Collateral risk. The phrase floated through the room like smoke. Clinical, detached. It meant lives, innocent ones. Sarah sat at the end of the table, her hands folded, her face calm. Inside, her chest tightened. She'd seen this before. Missions framed as necessary, framed as surgical, but the truth was never clean. Morrison sat across from her, jaw tight, eyes on her. He knew she was already calculating not just trajectories but consequences. The Admiral's voice carried over the room. "This target has eluded us for months. If he slips again, dozens of future operations are at risk. We cannot allow that." Sarah's voice cut in, quiet but sharp. "If you strike without adjustment, you'll kill civilians." The room shifted uncomfortably. Some officers avoided her eyes. Others stiffened, annoyed at her intrusion. Richardson exhaled. "We'll minimize exposure, that's all we can do." "Not enough," she said flatly. The words hung heavy. Silence stretched until Morrison spoke. "She's right. If we lose the people we claim to protect, we lose everything." The Admiral's gaze flicked between them, his pride and pragmatism colliding. Finally, he conceded. "Then propose your adjustment, Captain." Sarah leaned forward, tapping the digital map. Her finger traced narrow vectors, impossible angles. "Entry from bearing 142. Deploy GBU-39s with reduced payload, targeted only to the north wall. That buys you breach without collapse. SEAL team enters through Alpha Corridor. 0 civilian exposure." An intel officer frowned. "That margin's razor thin, one miscalculation." Sarah cut him off softly. "I don't miscalculate." The room stilled. No one argued further. Orders were set. Hours later, the ops center buzzed with tension. Screens lit with drone feeds, mapping the district in real time. Children still visible in the courtyards. Market stalls cluttering alleys. And in the middle, the target's compound, fortified but not impenetrable. Sarah stood at the console, headset ready. The weight pressed down harder than usual tonight. Not just soldiers' lives. Not just operators. Civilians. Innocents. People who would never know her name but whose survival rested on every calculation she made. Falcon control, Raptors on station, standing by. Her voice was steady. Viper lead, confirm Vector 142. Reduced payload, staggered interval. Execute on my mark only. Copy Falcon, weapons hot. She drew in a slow breath, eyes scanning the feeds. Timing was everything. The SEALs were in position, waiting for the corridor. "Stand by." Her chest tightened again. A memory surfaced, Kabul years ago, a mission too similar, a strike she had authorized, a building reduced to rubble, innocence among the dust. She had lived with those faces ever since. Her voice trembled just faintly. Mark. The strikes fell controlled, precise. The north wall crumbled inward, dust rising. No secondary collapse. Civilians untouched. Alpha corridor open, she said. Seals move. Morrison's voice crackled through, calm but urgent. Moving now. Breach in 3, 2. Gunfire erupted on the feeds. Operators surged into the corridor, shadows against smoke. The target's guards returned fire. Chaos exploded in narrow alleys. Sarah's voice cut through, guiding, adjusting. Raptors shift to bearing 150. Neutralize rooftop positions only. Low yield, avoid spillover. Copy Falcon, engaging. Strikes hit with surgical precision. Guards fell, the SEALs pushed deeper. Then a scream through the comms. One of the operators down, a second wounded. Sarah's pulse spiked, her voice sharpened. Raptors hold fire too close to friendlies. On the screens she saw it. A group of civilians, panicked, running from a side alley toward the chaos. Mothers clutching children, caught in the middle. Her chest constricted, she keyed the mic. SEALs, civilians in play, redirect east, alley Bravo now. Morrison's voice cut back, ragged. We'll lose the target. Sarah's breath hitched. The choice sharpened. Complete the mission or protect the innocents. The Admiral's voice thundered behind her. Take the shot, finish it. Sarah froze, her hands trembled. Her mind screamed calculations, strike vectors, blast radii, probabilities. But behind the math she saw the faces, the children. Not again. Her voice came sharp, defiant. Negative, civilians in zone, redirect now. The Admiral surged forward, his voice venom. That's an order. She turned on him, her voice like steel. And this is survival. You want their blood on your hands, do it yourself. The room went silent, radios crackled. Morrison's voice finally cut through. Copy Falcon, redirecting east, civilians clear. The SEALs shifted, pulling civilians out of crossfire. The target slipped deeper into the compound. A chance lost. The Admiral's face burned red with fury. But Sarah didn't care. Minutes later, the SEALs confirmed. Civilians safe, 2 wounded operators stable, target escaped. The mission ended not in triumph, but in compromise. The ops center emptied slowly, tension thick. Officers avoided her eyes. Richardson lingered, seething. Morrison approached her quietly. His voice was steady. You made the right call. Her throat tightened. Tell that to the ones who wanted the kill. He shook his head. A kill means nothing if it costs your soul. She looked at him, her eyes heavy with ghosts. You think I haven't already lost parts of it? He didn't answer. He just stood with her, silent, steady. Later, alone, Sarah sat in the dark of her quarters. No lights, no noise, just silence. Her hands shook again. She pressed them to her face, whispering words no one would hear. I couldn't do it. I couldn't sacrifice them. The silence answered, cruel and honest. And deep inside, she knew the war she fought wasn't just out there in distant streets. It was inside her, the endless battle between duty and conscience, precision and humanity. And she knew one truth most of all. This battle never ended, not for people like her. The fallout came swift. By dawn, reports had already spread through the base. The mission had saved civilians, but the target had slipped away. Some praised her decision, others cursed it. The Admiral's voice carried fury in closed-door meetings, calling it hesitation, failure, weakness. But the SEALs, the men who had seen it, who had pulled screaming children from rubble and carried them out alive, they knew better. Their silence toward her wasn't judgment. It was gratitude. Sarah walked through the base with quiet steps. She felt the stairs, some sharp, others soft. She ignored them all. In the hangar she found Morrison waiting, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. You knew this would happen, he said. She didn't answer at first. Her hand brushed along the wing of a raptor, the cold metal grounding her. Finally, she spoke. I knew there was no winning, not really. You chose humanity over orders. His voice was steady. That matters. Does it? Her eyes lifted to meet his. The Admiral sees failure. Intel sees a lost target. Half this base sees weakness. Only the civilians know what it costs to protect them, and they'll never know my name. Morrison stepped closer. They don't have to, you'll know. Her chest tightened. She looked away, the memories pressing harder. Kabul, Kandahar, names she couldn't forget, faces blurred in dust and fire. Knowing doesn't help, knowing just hurts. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Morrison spoke again, softer. Maybe hurt is the proof you're still human. She almost smiled, almost. The days that followed were thick with tension. Richardson pushed for disciplinary review. Officers debated in hushed tones. But the men who mattered most, the SEALs, carried her choice like a shield. They whispered her name in corridors with reverence, not scorn. And then the ceremony. The same courtyard where she had once been humiliated now filled with assembled ranks. Flags rippled, boots lined in perfect formation. The sun hung sharp in the sky, unforgiving. Richardson stood at the podium, his voice strained with formality. We are here to recognize Captain Sarah Chun, call sign Viper, for her extraordinary service in tactical coordination and her actions in preserving innocent lives during high-risk operations. His words fell like stones, respectful but heavy with his own pride swallowed raw. Sarah stood before them, civilian jacket still on her shoulders. She had refused dress uniform. She wasn't here for show. The SEALs saluted her again, not ordered but instinctive. And this time, she didn't return it immediately. She let the silence hold, let the weight of the moment rest on everyone watching. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, measured, almost fragile. You think recognition matters, medals, ceremonies, apologies, but they don't. Her eyes scanned the ranks. What matters are the choices you make when no one is watching, when pride and politics scream for one answer and humanity whispers another. That's where dignity lives, not in words, in actions. The courtyard stilled. No one moved. She let the silence linger, then finished softly. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She stepped back, her expression unreadable. The applause that followed was muted, awkward. But the eyes of the SEALs, sharp, steady, reverent, said everything. After the ceremony, she walked alone to the hangar. Morrison caught up to her, his footsteps heavy. You gave them something today, he said. I gave them words, she replied. No, he shook his head. You gave them truth, the kind they'll carry long after the flags come down. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the raptors lined in steel silence, machines that had carried her ghosts, her triumphs, her scars. One day, she knew, she would leave again. She would disappear back into the quiet, away from ceremonies and salutes. She wasn't made for stages. She was made for the moments in between, the radios filled with static, the impossible calculations, the decisions that carved survival out of chaos. But for now she stayed, because the fight had chosen her again, and this time she hadn't walked away. Later that night, she stood outside beneath the stars. The sky stretched infinite above her, vast and merciless. She thought of the men she had saved, the ones she had lost, the civilians who would never know how close death had been. Her chest ached, not with pride, not with regret, with something quieter, acceptance. The ghosts would never leave. She knew that now, but maybe they weren't just weight. Maybe they were reminders of why she fought, of why she chose as she did, of why she would always choose humanity over orders. She whispered into the night, her voice almost prayer. For every life I couldn't save, may the ones I did matter enough. The wind carried her words into silence. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt something loosen inside her. Not peace, not release, but a fragile balance, the kind you earn only by standing in the fire and refusing to look away. Her shadow stretched long across the tarmac, a lone figure, a legend they finally saw, a woman who carried dignity not in words but in choices. Viper. Not a call sign, not a legend, just a reminder that sometimes strength is silent. And dignity doesn't speak. It acts.